think this is a great question. And I almost have like three answers to it.
Thanks for taking the time to meet with me on this. I'm sure
Yeah,
you've seen
absolutely.
my electrolyte video that I've been putting out a few of them.
Yeah, I have.
And I wanted to reach out to a registered dietitian, somebody who like knows this stuff, because I'm just a certified nutrition coach and you have degrees behind your name. So what's your take on this electrolyte craze? And do you think the average person needs to be supplementing?
Yeah. So I think it's a new, not new, but it's kind of trendy right now. A lot of my clients ask me about whether or not they should take it. I think for the average person, most of us don't need added electrolytes, at least on a daily basis. But as needed can be helpful. So if someone's sweating a lot, they're exercising a lot, they live here at high altitude, for example, we have, different needs. In general, as dietitians, we're trained to always be food first. So I'm always educating, how can we get these different electrolytes through food before we resort to a supplement? Um, and then if it's truly needed, which it is in some cases, like I said, extreme sports, extreme sweating, things like that, then let's talk about, what are the best options for you based on your specific needs, your dietary intake.
That's fantastic. I agree with getting it in through Whole Foods because who wants to buy another thing when you can just eat your 3 or 4 meals in the day and be
Yep.
like, I'm good.
Exactly, exactly.
And then, do you think there are some misconceptions people have about electrolytes that you want to clear up?
Yeah, I think, for one, we think everyone needs electrolytes. I think that's a misconception. Not everyone does. I think we tend to think that supplements are harmless, and that's not the case either. So we have to really be able to discriminate, what am I actually getting? Um, I think there's also the misconception that all supplements are created equal, which is not the case. So supplements are not regulated by any organization. We do have third-party certification, which can be helpful in terms of understanding that what's on the outside of the label matches what's on the inside of the package. But that being said, you could have two brands and it's like comparing apples to oranges. And so what works for one person might not work for another person. And so that's where really taking that individualized approach is important.
That's awesome. I agree with not everybody needs electrolytes, and not all electrolytes are created the same,
Yep.
especially when they're in supplement form.
Yes.
And yeah, I, this is why I wanted to get a registered dietitian on here.
Well, I'm glad you did. I think it's great. I also like really respect when people, want to bring in outside voices. So thank you for doing this too.
No problem. And then this question's kind of for me. Is there a difference between supplemental magnesium and magnesium you get through foods?
Yes, there is. I probably could ramble about this for a long time, but essentially, part of why we're food first as dietitians is that the nutrients in food will always be absorbed better from food than from the supplemental form. So that's basic tenet number one. You're always going to get more of it from food. Number two is when it's supplemented, magnesium is bound to different compounds. There's different things that you might see. You might see magnesium glycinate or magnesium citrate or magnesium oxide, for example. What it's bound to, essentially, think of it as like a magnet, and how well we absorb it is based on what that magnet is. So some forms of supplemental magnesium are absorbed better than others. For example, like your glycinate, your citrate, tend to be better absorbed than something like a magnesium oxide. Um, the other big difference is that supplemental forms of magnesium can cause GI or gastrointestinal upset depending on the form. And so that's where a lot of times getting it from food instead, especially because it's around different nutrients, different carbs and proteins and fats, and it's a slower digestion and absorption process, tends to have less of an impact as far as the GI system goes.
Those are both solid and valid things, and exactly the answer I was looking for.
Perfect.
Because whenever you Google online, like magnesium in foods, it says magnesium, not magnesium chloride or magnesium citrate.
Right.
And the ease on the stomach is super important for today's day and age where so many things are processed, let's
Yes.
eliminate that additional processed nutrient for your body.
Exactly. If we can get it in its pure form, why not do that, right? So, um, like we've said, some people do need the extra. That is true. But if we can at least try to close that gap the best we can through food first, that's going to be better.
And then for sodium, do people really need to be looking at it with a magnifying glass, or what's your general advice for sodium?
Yeah, so recommendation for the general American through the dietary guidelines for Americans is no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day. That is the equivalent of 1 teaspoon of table salt. When we look at general population data, average American is consuming through food about 3,400 milligrams of sodium. So well
Holy cow.
exceeding that limit, yes. So with that, and then to put that into greater perspective, again, individualized. So, for example, American Heart Association says, hey, if you've got certain health conditions, that sodium requirement might only be 1,500 milligrams a day. So we do definitely need to pay attention to sodium. Again, it's going to depend on the population and depend on the person. Like, what's your activity level? What conditions or health conditions are you dealing with? How much are you sweating? What are you eating, right? Like, if we're eating primarily processed foods, and even if you think about not processed foods, but maybe someone's eating multiple servings of salted nuts or salted popcorn or even things like
Salted butter?
yeah, butter, bread, deli meats. There's a lot of foods that are already high in sodium, so we do need to be cautious not to overdo it. Um, and then also recently, within this, I think this past week, someone was hospitalized for using ChatGPT to like cut out sodium and they cut out too much salt. So there is such thing as not getting enough as well. And again, it's working with a professional to understand how much do I specifically need? What am I getting through food? And do I need to make sure I'm skipping the electrolytes because I'm already exceeding that through food? Or can I close the gap, even if it's adding tablespoon and not table salt and not using, an electrolyte powder necessarily?
And for the table salt, are you recommending people use Himalayan salt, iodinized salt, or Celtic salt?
Yeah, so when we look at the differences, a lot of times we talk about different mineral content, but for that to be a meaningful difference, you'd actually have to consume quite a significant amount of salt. So in that case, there's a couple of different approaches that I take. One is, table salt's a lot easier to overdo, whereas, larger granules are easier to see. We can maybe control portion a little bit better. So if someone's who's trying to control portion, that might be better. Iodized salt was created to help with iodine deficiencies, which impacts the thyroid. So iodized salt, as far as what you're keeping on your table, is typically useful depending on what your individual thyroid condition is. If you have a healthy thyroid, it can be beneficial. Normally, even though iodized salt is common as far as table salt, when salt or sodium chloride is put into processed foods in the US, typically it's not in the iodized form. So that's something to know as far as any type of thyroid. But as far as, which type of salt, again, you'd have to have pretty significant quantities for it to make a massive difference. So that's when I go more towards, least refined is great. What are you going to be able to control a portion of? What tastes good to you and what works best for your family or household?
That's all solid advice. I didn't know that they don't use iodinized salt in processed foods. I
Typically, they
figured they
don't.
were,
Maybe once in a while, but the rule of thumb is typically they don't.
that's good. And if you had a piece of advice for just the general population about electrolytes, what do you think the number one piece of advice would be?
I think this is a great question. And I almost have like three answers to it. So, I think one is listen to your body, right? We do know our body's best. Sometimes we feel like, I'm just really feeling dehydrated today. The water is just kind of running through me. I'm not feeling like I'm really absorbing it, or I'm like really sweating and I know I need to replace it. So listen to your body. consult with a professional. So obviously I'm biased towards registered dietitians, but a professional who understands, what are in these products? What am I getting? Because usually it's not just the electrolytes. There might be artificial sweeteners or colors or, whatever. And then again, not everyone needs the same threshold as far as milligrams of these things. So really making sure that you're working with a professional to understand, what you're getting and is this necessary? A lot of people are told they need supplements when they truly don't, which
Mhm.
segues into point three of food first always. So can you get potassium from your bananas, potatoes, avocados, raisins? Like, can you get magnesium from your pumpkin seeds, your almonds, your chia seeds? Like, can you get sodium through maybe the salted version of those, nuts and seeds? Really making sure that we're not just becoming dependent on supplements, but using them to fill the gaps, and really trusting our body and using food first.
So on the gold podium, we have listening to your body.
Yes.
On a silver podium, working with a professional that knows what they're talking about.
Yep.
And then bronze, not everybody's the same, and you don't need to overdo it.
Yes, exactly. That was a really perfect way of summarizing that. So it's hard to have a single piece of advice, especially when it comes to supplements, because it's so individualized. And to the point of listening to your body and working with an individual, I'm a huge proponent of always advocate for yourself. So if something doesn't sound right, don't be afraid to seek out another professional or another opinion. Make sure that you're putting yourself first throughout the whole process.
That's amazing advice.
Thank you.
Amazing advice. Because there's so many people out there that are afraid to tell somebody, this doesn't sound right. Go find somebody else. And then lo and behold, it wasn't right.
Yeah,
And thank goodness they talked to somebody else.
exactly. Exactly.
And where can people find you if they have any questions or need any guidance?
Yeah.
And what's going on with your business?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Defy Nutrition. On Instagram, it's got a period between the Defy Nutrition and Facebook, it's just Defy Nutrition. And then my website is defy-nutrition.com. So I always start with a free complimentary good fit call, I like to call it. Not everyone's a good fit for me, and I'm not a good fit for everyone. And so my goal is to connect you with the best possible provider that matches your goals. And then from there, we can either do individual counseling. I do custom meal plans as well. And I do have supplement resources too. So if it is something you want to dive deeper in, I'm happy to discuss that.
And what's your specialty?
My specialty, I'm a certified fertility dietitian. So I've been an RD now for about a decade. I got credentialed with this additional area of fertility. So I love everything from preconception through pregnancy and postpartum. That being said, a lot of my clients are males as well. So I think there's a misconception that fertility has to only be females, and really it's both. So anything hormone related, and really making sustainable changes is what's up my alley.
That's awesome. Yeah, it definitely takes two to make a human, and
Exactly.
both are just as important.
Exactly, exactly. So don't think it's only women, it's both.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join this. I hope you have a great day, and everybody else, have a great day.
Thank you so much.